welcome back. I'm the Book Guy, and I'm here to help you find a good book to read. We're in the middle of YAnuary, our monthly theme of looking at young adult books. Today we're discussing the Shades of Magic series, even though it is technically not young adult. You see, I read this entire series thinking it was young adult, and I didn't find anything in the story to really contradict that. I scheduled it for a young adult month, only then did I find out it is truly, officially classified as adult fantasy. In fact, the author herself confirms this. She writes under the name Victoria Schwab when she's writing young adult books, but goes by V.E. Schwab when writing adult fantasy, and these are V.E. Schwab.
My mind is blown.
So maybe later in the video we'll have a discussion about how books are classified as adult or young adult and decide how much that classification actually matters. Anyway, this series is comprised of the Shades of Magic trilogy and the start of a second trilogy with just one book so far, The Fragile Threads of Power. We'll look at the story, we'll discuss the strengths and weaknesses of the series, and ultimately see if it's going to be right for you. One thing I have to disclose at the start here. I'm a little biased today. I always try to report these books objectively to help you decide if you want to read it. But today, I really liked book 1, but I found books 2 and 3 to be frustrating and even boring. But then I really liked book 4. So my personal enjoyment was a bit like a U-shape. I'm going to be a bit negative today regarding the middle books, but remember, the only opinion that matters today is yours. You might have completely different tastes in books than I do. You may read these books and hate the ones I love, or love the ones I hate. Instead of a U-shape, you might have an A-shape? Maybe? Okay, that wasn't the best metaphor. Look, anyway, I'm going to try to be objective in the review anyway, help you decide for yourself if you want to read this series. Let's begin. Kelmaresh is an Antari, a magician with the ability to cross between worlds. Long ago, there were 4 worlds that all had the exact same London. This made it easy for people to cross between these 4 worlds all the time, until one London was corrupted by reckless use of magic and utterly destroyed. Now the doors to those worlds have been closed off to stop the spread of this dark magic. Only Antari can cross over now, yet Antari were blamed for the death of that world and killed off in a massive purge. Kelmaresh is one of the last ones left. Kel is adopted into the royal family of Red London, the most magical of the 3 remaining worlds. The king and queen love him, yet they clearly love their birth son a little bit more, and put Kel to work crossing between worlds. He wonders if he's really part of this family, or if he's just being used for his power. But everything changes when he meets Delilah Bard, a dangerous young thief living off the streets of Grey London, a world where magic has been forgotten. Delilah steals a magical object off Kel, but this humble thief has no idea the dangerous power she's playing with in the artifact she now holds. Kel must track down this thief before it's too late and a darker shade of magic is unleashed. So this series does a bit of world hopping, but it's not like Rick and Morty, where they're world hopping between infinite parallel universes with unlimited possibilities. These 4 worlds all have a London, and that's the link. Besides, they don't go too far outside of London into those other worlds, so we don't need to grasp too much of the geography here to understand it. The key to understanding this comes down to the magic. Quite simply, Grey London has 0 magic. They forgot it all once the borders to the worlds closed, and that's kind of like our world. White London has only a little bit of magic left, but it's not in great condition. People tried to control magic and corrupted it. Red London has all the magic, where people live in harmony and balance with the magic rather than trying to control it. Kind of the opposite of White London. Finally, there is the world that was completely destroyed, Black London. This world is sealed away, and everything that ever came from there has been destroyed, lest the magic spread like a highly contagious plague. As the reader, you don't need to understand the layout of London too closely. It'll mention the River Thames and the palace and a bridge, but as long as you remember the colours of the Londons, you'll be fine. Magic in this world is pretty straightforward elemental. We're talking Avatar, earth, water, fire, air. Plus the fifth and most difficult new magic being bone magic, to have power over the body itself. However, unlike in Avatar, it's fairly common for people in this world to have 2 of these powers, although 3 powers is pretty rare. This is where the Antari come in. They're the only ones able to use all 5 magic. Plus, Antari have a 6th magic unique to them, blood magic, and this is what they use to travel between worlds. No one really knows where the Antari came from originally, and they've never had a particularly high population even before the Purge. Yet you can spot an Antari pretty easily. They always have one blue eye and one black eye. The Antari believe that all magic is either balance or chaos, and that the blue eye represents balance and the black eye represents chaos. It was that very black eye that caused people to fear them. When Black London fell into ruin, people destroyed all artifacts from that world. They also assumed that the Antari's black eye was a mark of Black London, and so they killed Antari in that dumb, superstitious panic.
We have found the witch, may we burn her!
But that was all about 300 years ago. Nowadays, no one really thinks much about the Antari. They're not some persecuted minority anymore, they're just a curiosity, more like a circus freak, rather than something to be feared. There's some fascinating character work in this series. I don't think it's quite to the godlike, hyper-realistic level of Robin Hobb or Fonda Lee, but it's still pretty good, mostly. I think the characters often start out as a familiar character trope. For example, Kel Moresh is the last of his kind, and he's not really sure if he belongs in his adoptive family. This is the outcast trope, and it's quite familiar. Yet all the same, Kel is an interesting character because he deeply loves his family, especially his adopted brother Rai. Kel is so fiercely loyal to him. The fact that Kel loves his family even though he's unsure if he belongs makes him a much more nuanced take of an old trope. It becomes more original the deeper into the story you go. Delilah Bard is our thief and anti-hero. She carries a knife around and always stabs first and asks questions later. She's not really a bad person, just someone who's been abandoned so many times that she's become entirely self-reliant and indifferent to those around her. As interesting as the anti-hero dynamic is, I do need to criticize Lila a little bit. She always talks about stabbing and murdering people, but, well, this might be a slight spoiler, but her violent temperament is like a Chekhov's gun that never really goes off. We're presented with a chaotic, unpredictable character that ends up behaving herself a lot of the time. She talks a lot of smack and threatens people, but that's kind of it. This was honestly a major disappointment for me. Not that I particularly want someone to get stabbed, but I want you to follow through on your intentions, damn it. Lila does have an arc, and it's a really good arc, but it's a little bit like writing an assassin character who never assassinates anyone. Yeah, right? Anyway, one last major character is Holland. He's another Antari, but he's now magically enslaved to the rulers of White London. When all the trouble begins in Book 1, he becomes almost like the Terminator, an emotionless machine hell-bent on pursuit of his targets. Yet Holland's true self still exists, somewhere deep down, where he's hiding from the horrors of his slavery, right down in the depths of his mind. Who would he become if he was ever set free? Holland is an anti-villain, and his life is painfully tragic. So I really like the world building in this series, and I enjoy the characters. However, the one area where I think the series is a bit inconsistent in quality is the plot. So I'm going to break down the plot discussion today into segments. I think the plot of Book 1 is fantastic. It's one of the reasons why this book was so popular and kind of went viral at the time of its release. Our hero, Kel, is robbed by the anti-hero Delilah, and both are pursued by the reluctant anti-villain Holland. It's a fantastic dynamic, and I love just about every minute of it. It's like a chase novel. So yes, think Terminator or perhaps Da Vinci Code. You run from the bad guy and solve the mystery. It's fast-paced, action-packed, and full of intrigue and clues. The character dynamic is strong, the magic and the world building are full of wonder, and at only 400 pages, it's hard to put this book down. Yet the later books shift away from this. What's set up in Book 1 is not quite what we get in Book 2. The plot of Book 2 is perhaps the most frustrating, at least for me. You see, after the life and death mad dash of the first book with mystery, surprises, and a high-stakes showdown, Book 2 is all about sports. Red London is hosting a big competition called the Element Games, where magicians from all countries can come and compete in a tournament to see who's the best magician of them all. Also, the matches are perfectly safe and no one gets hurt, so there's no risk to the characters whatsoever. This is such a strong tonal shift away from book 1. Instead of a chase, we stay still. Instead of hopping between worlds, we literally stay in Red London the whole time. Instead of life and death, we have the satisfaction of winning versus the disappointment of loss. Still, there are things to love about this book. After all, the whole point of the Elemental Games is to improve international relationships with other countries. There are politics at play in these games, with real stakes. If one country performs poorly, then others will know their magic is weak. The losing country might become vulnerable to attack, so there's some stakes, but it's a much more distant threat. Compared to the first book, where death is waiting behind every corner, the second book also spends a lot of time on interpersonal drama, and yes, a little bit of romance. Everyone's arguing, misunderstanding, miscommunicating, dealing with their personal demons. There is some pretty good character work here. In particular is Kel's relationship with his adoptive family. That's a real highlight, but it's, again, such a strange follow-up to book 1. There's also a lot of time spent on a ship at sea at the start of the book, and I'm not sure why. Lila hangs out with the ship captain called Alucard, and he becomes a major character afterwards, yes, but I still just don't understand what all the seafaring plots were about in this book. Something to do before the games start, I guess? I don't even have commentary to add on that. It's there. Anyway, book 3 changes things again. So you know Black London. Well, surely you know that's a Chekhov's gun waiting to go off, right? Yes, it's not a spoiler to talk about it. In book 3, the barrier between worlds is crumbling and the corrupted magic of Black London is beginning to overflow. It will take everyone fighting together to have any chance to hold it back and save all worlds. This plot is a lot more epic, but I still have 2 things I need to complain about. First, the villain in book 3 is more of a faceless blob of evil magic, rather than a character. It's an intimidating threat, but it's not that interesting. Now, you can absolutely have a Sauron-type character in your story who is just a Dark Lord who is evil and not much else. But one of the reasons why Sauron works so well in the story is because he has many servants who represent him, such as Gothmog, the Nazgul, the Mouth of Sauron, and even the Ring itself. They are aspects of his personality. Plus, Sauron has a military presence in the story. He has tactics and a will that the characters are constantly combating.
He will raise Minas Tirith to the ground before he sees a king return to the throne of men.
So he's more than just a dark blob of evil. If you do decide to do a dark blob of evil in your story, you have to at least make it horrifying. Like The Thing, for example. Otherwise, if it's not a Dark Lord who's involved in the plot or a scary thing, then it's just a looming threat. That's not very interesting. The second problem with book 3 is the beginning of the book. This trilogy is a lot like the Hobbit trilogy, where the start of the third movie really should have been the climax of the second one. Remember how Desolation of Smaug ends with Smaug flying off, then the Battle of the Five Armies start with his fight and death in Lake Town. And the entire audience was like, why wasn't that at the end of the last one? Well, book 3 of Shades of Magic has the same problem. It starts with a huge bang and an epic sequence of magic, literally one of my favorite parts. Yet it left me wondering why that wasn't at the end of book 2 where it belonged. It's a very weird structuring decision, and I can't say more without spoilers. Okay, I've trashed on this trilogy enough. As you can see, I think it's a pretty disjointed trilogy, where there's a desperate chase, a sports tournament, and then a fight to save the world. These books all feel so different to each other, and not in a good way. If people like the start of the series, they want the next one to be more of that, but with variety. If they get something that's so different, well, it can feel like a broken promise. I am sorry I can't be more positive about the series, but I can be more positive about where it's going next. The Fragile Threads of Power is the first book in a new trilogy set 10 years later. Finally, we're actually back to jumping between worlds. In White London, a young Antari has emerged and declared herself queen. Her people fuel her magic with their blood, willingly given in a cultish fervency. The new queen plans to heal the world and bring magic back, restoring balance. But her ambition may extend beyond her reach. In Red London, the crown is threatened by a new violent uprising, using random attacks to destabilize the country. This new enemy wants to rid the world of magic and finally set it free. Kel and Lila are living a quieter life out at sea, yet a simple job to retrieve an artifact has become much more complicated than they expected, and they may soon find themselves back in the thick of things once again. Yet strangest of all is a young girl, Tess, with the ability to fix anything that's broken. Her magic works in a way completely different to anything we've seen before. She might be the sign that magic is changing, or perhaps unraveling once and for all. The thing I like about this new book is it takes all the different types of stories we had in the first trilogy and just puts them in one book. Instead of book 1 being a chase, book 2 being drama, and book 3 being epic magics, we've now got it all together and balanced together. It feels so much more cohesive and fixes what I see as a major problem of the first trilogy. This book is also the longest of them all, but in the best way. The books are actually 400, 512, 624, and now 648 pages long. I think Schwab just owned the fact that she wanted to make a heavier book at this point. She committed to writing multiple plot lines on a grander scale, and it was absolutely the right decision. I hope she keeps this up for the next series. Okay, now let's discuss the whole categorization thing. I read this series with no prior information going in. I love doing this when I can, go into a series completely blind and be totally surprised at every step of the way. I didn't even know what VE stood for. I very deliberately didn't look up the gender of the author as a fun little experiment. Within the first few chapters, I thought this series is definitely YA. It got all the common YA tropes. Young protagonist, a journey of self-discovery, new potential romance, questioning authority, and some trope-based characters, all of which are staples of the genre. I was also convinced the author was male. I know. But it's a very male-dominated series. Lila is the only major female character. And after I read book 2, I finally looked up and discovered, yes, the author is a woman, and that surprised me and made me question myself.
I re-examined my personal biases.
Yet I read all 4 of these books and was fully convinced it was YA. I scheduled this video for a YA month, but it absolutely is classified as adult fantasy, which begs the question, what the hell? Do these labels even mean that much? Are they completely interchangeable? Or is I just wrong and I'm overthinking?
Am I so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong.
Despite being someone who reads a lot, I literally could not tell that this was an adult fantasy, and I was wrong. But there is a certain degree of these being meaningless titles. Many people say that the whole concept of a young adult label is just a marketing gimmick to sell books. And you know what? There is definitely some truth to that. But YA also fulfills a crucial function in literature and education, in designing books for younger readers that deal with the problems common to that stage of life. And it keeps them reading. My biggest takeaway from this experience is that yes, the line between adult and young adult is pretty damn blurry. But that's also why you shouldn't trust publishers to define it for you. I would even go so far as to say don't let authors define the genre for you either. Define it yourself. You've heard of the concept death of the author? It means only you can interpret their work in whatever way resonates with you. It doesn't have to be the one correct way that the author intended. Well, let me present to you the concept of the death of the publisher. This is where you can read whatever book you like without worrying about what marketing label they've put on it. This also means that sometimes if you dismiss young adult books because you don't like how the young adult label is used, then you might be missing out on some great books. Ultimately, the choice here is yours.
The power is yours!
Always take the adult or young adult label with a grain of salt and use your own faculties to decide for yourself. Trust your reader instincts. Interpret however you like. That's what makes reading so much fun. Representation is strange in this book. It's really high in some areas and very low in others. Regarding women, we have Lila Bard, a strong independent woman with a lot of screen time and a good arc. And I really think everyone else is male. I mean, except the Queen, who's just like there. It's a very male-dominated story. There are several more women added in the next trilogy, for sure, and I should also mention there is a school of thought that says female authors should not have to over-represent women in their books. But there is a notable absence. I'm not commentating, I'm just stating the facts for those of you who want to hear them. Regarding race, the story is set in London, so there is all the usual diversity of a multicultural metropolitan area. There's also the added layer of the YAnuary, a people who were victims of violence in the distant past because of prejudice and their magic. A lot of people in the present day assume that that was all in the past and we should move on, while Kelmaresh is living day to day with the fact that he's one of the last of his kind. This is a great depiction of how past acts of oppression and genocide can leave a wound that lasts for generations, and how people often want to avoid the issue altogether instead of taking any responsibility. Yay for depictions of racism! However, there is so much queer representation in this book. The author even declared that every character in the book should be presumed queer unless stated otherwise. There are several openly queer characters and a gay romance as well. In the next trilogy, we even have some non-monogamy, where 3 people are in a relationship together, though it is a V-shape relationship, where 2 people date the same person but not each other. So this is a pretty queer-friendly series overall. There is almost no content warning for this series. That's half the reason why I thought it was YA. There's action violence but nothing graphic. Only the vaguest sexual innuendo. The only thing that might be a bit dark is Holland's enslavement. Even then, we don't see the extreme abuse or the mistreatment, just the implication of it happening maybe off screen. Yeah, this is a pretty light series in terms of content. Is the ending worth it? Tough question today. So the ending of the first trilogy is sort of, it's okay. It's not particularly brilliant, it's not particularly terrible. But as I've said, I thought the 4th book was fantastic. So it may be worth you sticking through it all the way into Trilogy 2, which is off to a great start so far. Only time will tell if the new era will play out. And how much should you try? Well, the first book is a strong start. You'll know right away if you want to read more. Just remember the later books are quite different to what's set up in the beginning. Hopefully after hearing all of this today, you'll have a good understanding of how much of this series you want to read. So good luck and happy reading! Thanks for watching. Now next week we're continuing our YA theme with the Shattered Seas trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, a YA series that has some very strong feelings from the fans with a bit of mixed reactions. I'm excited to tackle that one next. I also want to show off, you might have noticed on the shelf behind me that my books have arrived. These are the first prints ever of my book. They just arrived in paperback and hardcover, and I love them both so much. They're good quality, thick pages, and the well-formatted spines, and the cover is neat, and the text isn't lost in the crease of the book. You know, don't you hate that when you can't read into the spine of it? Yeah, and they're so neatly formatted. I love it so much. There have definitely been some happy tears this week. We're hard at work fulfilling the Kickstarter pre-orders at the moment, but I'm confident that these will go on sale by the time of next week's video. And I hope you'll grab your copy. If you need convincing, you can check out the video I did on my own books. Thank you to everyone who has read the ebook so far and has gone and left a rating and a review. That kind of support goes a long way for new authors, so thank you. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a comment to say so, and like and subscribe. You can also check out my shop and my Patreon if you're feeling extra thankful. Otherwise, I'll see you next week for another book review. Take care of yourselves, my friends, and I hope you enjoy a good book today. Bye!